This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Kathy Worthington, welcoming you to a new edition of Late Boomers, and I'm here with my co-host, Mary Elkins. Today, we are going to chat with editor, publisher, author, John Bond. He has overseen the publishing of 500 books.
And I'm Mary Elkins. John is the author of a 3-book series, The Little Guides. He takes authors from idea to plan and to finding publishing. All of us boomers who have books brewing in us need to get to know him. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you very much for having me on today. It's a pleasure to meet both of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Well, we appreciate your being here too.
It's a good subject for us. Please tell us a little bit how you got started on this path to counseling authors. What led up to this?
Well, when I was a preteen, I grew up in Bucks County in Pennsylvania. My parents used to go to house auctions, and many of them they went to and were in Princeton, New Jersey. And at the very end of the auction, the books would go because nobody wanted to take the books away. So they would buy for a couple dollars or $5 these 10, 20 boxes of really interesting books. And young John just dove into looking at all this interesting things and thinking about the stories that were in all of them, and then starting to collect them. Early on, I worked as a librarian in a high school, and then I determined I wanted to do something else. So I had the opportunity to get a position at a publishing company in South Jersey, which is where I live. And I started as an editor and became managing editor, and then book publisher, and eventually chief content officer. It was a great opportunity, and I met with some tremendous people on the author side, but also on the publishing side. And about 10 years ago, after having worked there for 30 years, I determined I wanted...
What company?
The name of the company was Slack Incorporated. It goes by the Y&O Group now. It is an academic publisher. And so about 10 years ago, I determined I wanted to do something different, and I started doing publishing consulting, but I also do other things as well now. And I connect with authors or publishers or associations, and I help them think through developing great content and, most importantly, delivering great content. So it's been a journey to connect with authors and to have the experience of being an author myself.
Wow. That's great. Well, how does one, other than sitting down at the computer or at your notepad, how does one get started writing a book?
It's a great question. I think the first part is asking yourself what your motivation is. Do you just want to express yourself? Do you have a story to tell? Are you interested in being a storyteller? Do you have a nonfiction book that you would like to write? So thinking through your motivations, I always suggest, is the first place to start. And most likely in your mind, maybe for years, maybe for decades, you've been thinking about writing. And maybe there have been times when it was in high school or college or as a young adult or beyond that you started to make small attempts at a short story or an essay or a blog post. And then you start to think, well, maybe I want to do more than just this. At that point, start to think through the form that your work best fits. As I said, it could be a short story, could be a novel. What would the genre be? Or maybe you're interested in writing for the internet and, like I said, a blog post or something else. And then start to think through what you want to say. At the end of the day, the most important thing is it really be from the heart. It's something that's very important to you and something you really want to express, and that you really use quality as your guide. So you want to use something that speaks to other people and that they feel is going to touch them as well. I'm not talking about grammar, and of course that's important. I'm talking about have a message that you know resonates with your core audience, however small that might be, because the beauty of the days of the internet and Amazon is you can have a very niche topic and definitely reach your audience, or you can have a very broad topic. You could want to be the next Stephanie Myers or Kurt Vonnegut or Stephen King, and that's a great goal to have. But so really starting out with what your message is and what the format that you want to deliver it in.
That's really
Wow,
interesting.
yeah. And then
Wow.
say we get that together, how do we find an agent?
Oh wow, we jumped a bunch of steps, but I'm going to fill.
I want to. We can
Yeah.
go back and pick up the steps.
No. So here, let's do that.
I'm
Let's
happy
do
to
that.
pick up the steps.
No,
Okay.
let's do that. Let's say
Just
you've written your
jump
novel.
to the agent.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's say you've written your novel, and then let's say you've had a bunch of people you know that are the target audience read it and give you honest feedback. I'm not talking about your spouse or your parent or your best friend. I'm talking about people that are the target audience, and you've given them permission to give you honest feedback. You've looked at all the feedback and you've been honest with yourself. Some of it probably resonates and is true. Some of it maybe isn't the image of what you want or the picture of what you want for your book. And you've made those changes. Now you have your final draft of your novel that you have really done the best job that you could possibly do. And that's really key. Now you're going to go look for a way to publish. So there are two avenues. You can seek a publisher, and there are plenty of publishers that allow you to approach them directly, or you can seek an agent. This goes back again to motivation. If you want to get published at Random House or the like, you're going to need an agent. They don't accept unagented requests. But with some publishers, they are more than willing to accept unagented requests. So your motivation is really important. If you want to be at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, or if you want to be on an Oprah-like TV show to talk about your book, then you are going to need an agent. Let me take them and set them both aside here. So for the publisher, you're going to really want to know the competitive and comparable books that are in your area. They should be well known. They should be in print. Please don't say there's nothing like this that's out there, because there's always something that's competitive for your book.
How many books would you need to come up with for an indie publisher?
I think what you should do is you should have a complete census of what's out there. So it's not that you have to go through every science fiction book, but you really have to know the books that compete directly against yours. I'm not going to put a number to your census, but it should take a while. This is not I sit in a couple hours while I'm watching TV. When you do send it into the publisher, and if they ask for comparable titles, I would suggest 4 to 8. And it really depends on the niche you're in. If you're in a very specific
by different
area,
authors, right? 4 to 8
of course, by different
authors.
authors. Remember, they should be in print and they should be popular. I would not suggest self-published books as comparable books unless they are enormous bestsellers. So you would also want to look at your market. Who specifically is your market? And what that tells you is, well, first let me say, don't say everybody that loves romance or everybody that loves espionage is the market. Be more specific. Think about a profile. I know that's a bad word, but profile the people that would be your target market for your book. Use these things to start to think about the type of agent or publisher that you would like to approach. As for agents, there are 2 great databases. I can send them to you and you can post them in the show notes.
That would be great.
I don't personally use them. I know people that have used them that have really said good things about them. There is a fee. It's usually a month-by-month fee. But there are people on there that are agents that you would want to go through and think carefully about your genre and what your target market is. When you're looking for agents, look for ones that specialize in your area. So that's very, very important. If they only want a 10-page sample, do not send them a 20-page sample. If they only want XYZ, don't send them XY or XYZA. Stick very closely to the requests or the mandates from the agent and do not deviate from them. They're looking for a reason to cross you off the list. One
Mm.
more thing
Mm-hmm.
from agents. An agent should never be paid. So if you come across somebody that said, for X number of dollars, I'll look at your book, or X number of dollars, I'll give you feedback on the market, that's not an agent. They are somebody that's making money off of being an editor
Right.
or promotional editor or
Mm-hmm.
developmental editor. So they only get paid through royalties when your book is sold. So be very careful. A lot of people call themselves agents that are not really.
That's interesting because, of course, Mary and I know that from the entertainment business too. You don't pay
Mhm.
your agent up front. They get paid
That's
when you
right.
work.
That's
Mhm.
right.
So that's
right.
really important.
Absolutely.
Good
Um,
info.
I have
Thank you.
tons more questions about this, but let's talk about you started to talk about finding a publisher. If
Oh
you
yeah.
wanted,
So with the
as far as if you we have spoken about like getting the big one of the big five. It's Random House, what Penguin, what are the others?
Yeah, so if you're looking for an independent publisher that's not one of the ones that only accept agented material, um, start to look at the genres that they're in and how active they are. So let's say if you find a publisher, sometimes a regional, sometimes a medium-sized publisher, or even a small publisher that you feel will do right by you in the traditional publishing model, look at what they're currently publishing. So sometimes people will do some research and see, I see somebody's done this book on dystopian fiction, and I really like that. However, that book may have been from 10 years ago. And
Right.
then you go and look at what they're currently publishing, and you find out that they haven't been publishing that much. So,
Mm.
what their current list is from 2024, 2025, and maybe from 2026 will be very valuable.
Mhm.
That'll tell you where their emphasis is right now.
And
Read
you
the
would
about.
expect that information to just be available on the internet in general? Or are
Well,
you sending
if
an inquiry letter to them? What
if
do you
you
have?
go if you go to the publisher's website and you go to their book listing, many times there'll be a filter of what's available. So you'll be able to filter by most recent or by year, and you'll be able to scroll through it by the genre that you're in and see what's there. Another thing that you're able to do is go to Amazon. Amazon's got some great points, it's got some negative points. They are unfortunately the de facto people in this market, but they also are sometimes not the best friends of publishers and authors. Having said that, if you go to Amazon or something similar and you go to their advanced search section and you start to look at similar titles or titles that you particularly know, you'll go and you'll see a drop down that not only allows you to search by author, title, but also by publisher. So by putting that publisher in
Oh,
there and then separating and filtering it by year, you'll be able to see that information at Amazon. Now, when you
Great.
find it at the publisher, it's the most accurate at the publisher, whereas Amazon puts in what they know, and sometimes they have it right and sometimes they don't.
Mm.
So finding publishers that are doing good, solid work in your genre that are active in that area now versus in the past would be the best way to proceed. And then you
Well,
go to their website. It usually says how to submit a proposal or a book to them. And then
talk
once
about
again,
that if you would, because I think that indie publishers require more than an agent does as far as what you submit to them. Is that correct?
that is sometimes even for a novel, they'll request a book proposal. A book proposal is a 20 to 25 page or longer document, industry standard of the topics it covers. And it goes through and gives you exact information about what they want about you, an extended table of contents, the market, as I said, the competitive books, and then something that's very important. Don't everybody groan right now, but they want to know about your author promotional platform. And what
Yes.
and what this means is 20,
wow.
30, 20, 30, 40 years ago, the publisher was solely responsible for the marketing and promotion and distribution of the book. And increasingly today, they want the author to participate in it to a certain degree and to be able to connect with their audience. Do not say to the publisher, well, I'll do whatever you want. That's my author promotional platform. They're looking for you to understand and be able to connect with your market. And that may be through a significant social media account, maybe through
What is
speaking with
significant on this? Uh, tell
what
us.
it really comes down to is your genre and how much the social media account is about that. So if you have your Facebook page that your friends and relatives have all connected with and you have 500 connections, that's not specifically about your book and about that market. But if you have, let's say, a Twitter account or an X account where you're only speaking about uh, young adult books and you have an active following on there among people that are active in that area, that will be a more significant following. Let's say you also have a podcast that you do, or you have a YouTube channel, and so on. So there are ways that they want to know you want to connect with your audience, and you're going to explain to them about your new project and get them as excited as you're going to as they want to be. So from that point of view, the author promotional platform is you giving exact details over how you would connect with the audience. So going back to what you were saying, Mary, sometimes independent publishers will request many things from you more than what an agent may. And one of the things might be that author promotional platform or the book proposal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A question. What if, like, this is the Late Boomers podcast?
Hmm.
Our audience is late boomers, and above and below. We have young people listening too. But what if you write a book that is for younger people, but you are older?
Well, I don't think anybody really thinks about, when they think of classic books, the age of what the author was. So whoever wrote The Joy of Cooking, nobody's really thought how old were they when they wrote it, because what they're really going by is how great the recipes are and how great the instructions are. So from that point of view, I think if we're talking about a novel here, if you speak in a genuine voice and you have a message or a story that you want to tell that will connect, whether it be timeless or geared towards a specific time of life, what really matters is your voice and the genuineness of it. Now, to be honest, if you're selling a novel to 25-year-old men, sure, it would be better if you were a 25-year-old man, but at the end of the day, it's your story and the genuineness of it that matters. So I don't think it's solely the criteria, but of course it does help with being connected through that author promotional platform.
It's really difficult because authors have to use the other side of their brain to do all the marketing, and it's not the side of the brain that they use when they sit in a room writing on the computer or a notepad. It's a completely different switch. But you're saying, but it sounds to me like if you're going to write, say, a novel, you need to be developing your social media the entire time you're writing the novel.
That's right.
So that you're ready going out of the gate. You can't start creating social media followings, to my experience, take 2, 3, 4 years to accumulate. If you're going to get a bunch of followers, if you've got a niche market, these kind of things, it's not overnight. So what do
Yeah,
you
so
tell people about that?
you've hit on something that's very important. I have to say I've had the experience of speaking to many authors that say, I simply want to write the book and I want nothing to do with marketing or promoting it.
I get that.
And I understand that perspective, and that was a perspective for many years, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe into the 90s, maybe even into the O's. But that's really not the situation as much today. Remember, it doesn't all fall on your shoulders, but it is important because you are the person that is the best ambassador, the best advocate for your book. You're going to have that enthusiasm. When I see the two of you and the genuineness of your interest and enthusiasm for doing what you're doing right now, nobody can do this for you. Somebody couldn't come in as an intern and promote your podcast the way the two of you do with your energy and enthusiasm right now. Going back to your comment about starting early, it's very, very important. You are correct. While you're thinking of your idea, that is the time not for you to plan social media to get followers, but that's the time for you to start to think with, how you're going to connect with your audience. And it can take many forms. The one thing I
Mm-hmm.
do want to caution with social media, and I think a little bit, Kathy, you fell into the trap there, is by it's a place to gain followers. And really, what you have to think about for whatever the channel you do, whether it's a podcast or social media, speaking engagements, writing guest blogs, doing a YouTube channel, speaking live, you have to do it as a genuine thing that brings you joy and brings you energy to connect with that audience. The thing I'm really interested in when I speak with authors one on one, I'm really interested in hearing their idea and helping them to whatever their motivation is to try to find a place that's right for them. It could just be self-publishing and they're going to have a few hundred books that they're able to distribute to friends, or it could be that Random House moonshot that we talked about. So from that point of view, you really have to be into it and be really excited about doing it, as opposed to, let's say, at the end of your novel, you click spell check and you go back and say, this is the thing I had to do. So there has to be a bit of energy, enthusiasm for it. And if it's done as a responsibility, it will lack a little bit of what it needs.
Right. I
Interesting.
get that. When do you usually tell people they should self-publish?
So let's use three different terms. There's self-publishing, there's
Okay.
hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing. Traditional
Yeah.
publishing is the Random House model. You give it to them, they take all the responsibility, they pay all the money, and they pay you a royalty. Some people complain about how much the royalty is, but at the end of the day, if you're a first novelist or a first-time author, you're happy to have a book contract.
That's right.
Self-publishing years ago was called Vanity Press, and it had a bad name to it. But today it's something completely different. If you use a service like Amazon Kindle Direct or Ingram Spark, you're able to completely create a quality product that rivals anything that Random House would put out if you're willing to invest your time and your treasure with that. Now, having said that, all you end up with is a book. Could be a paper book, could be an ebook. So what that means is the analogy I like to make there is the same thing about the tree falling in the forest. If you create that book, never do any marketing and promotion of the self-published book, never tell anybody about it. Is it even a book if nobody's ever bought a copy of it? So the author promotional platform is even more important for self-publishing. So you have to be prepared to be that person that gets out there and beat the drums. In the middle is hybrid publishing. And what hybrid publishing is something that it may be right for some, but I want you to think very carefully about. These are a group of companies, I mean, there's a fair number, that they ask you for some money to offset their hard dollar costs, such as, can you give us some money to offset the typesetting or the page makeup or the printing or this or that, and then you'll get a much higher royalty back. There are some good hybrid publishing companies out there, but I will say there are a fair number that all they are is self-publishing in disguise, and they just want to give you the illusion that there's a greater marketing and distribution push between them. So you really need to grill them, and I mean grill them over specifically what they're doing, dealing with marketing and distribution, to not make them a self-publishing company.
Can you
So
give us some examples of the type of questions you need to ask?
what they're going to say is, they're going to say, well, your book's going to be available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and your book's going to be available to any bookstore that wants to order it. But is that really doing anything? I mean, any book that gets into the system gets listed at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. They're going to say, we're going to put it on our social media account here at hybridpublishing.com. I made that URL up. So we're going to put it on our social media account. But how many followers do they have, and how much is that influence people? They're going to say, we go to these 2 big book trade events, and you have the option of displaying your book there. Once again, how many of your target audience are at these events? So what you're going to want to know is, of your target audience, let's use romance for an example. How do they connect with the romance audience? How are they into romance specific book websites, or bookstores or the like. So you're going to want to find out specifically things that they're going to do. If they always turn around and say, well, for an additional $795, you can have your book
Or 7,000.
or you can have your book promoted at the romance bookstores. So all they're doing is adding on additional fees based on the initial big fee that they charged you. So you want to really press them. The more that they squirm, the more I would be reticent, and the more they're happy to answer your questions and give you specific details about your genre, the more I might be interested in them being a true hybrid publisher.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Thank you.
Then let's talk about ebooks.
Okay.
They are obviously the future, but do you believe that they are the future? And also, will people still have hardback books to read where they can hold them and in the middle of the night when they wake up rather than turning on the screen?
Sure.
It'll keep you up all night. Talk about ebooks.
So one of the good things that came out of the pandemic was the proof that paper is nowhere near going away. I mean, paper saw a tremendous resurgence at the beginning and the middle of the pandemic, and even now that we're in post or afterwards of the pandemic, you start to see that paper books still have a high interest in certain areas. Now, we can all agree that certain things, encyclopedias, dictionaries, whatever, have been dramatically affected by the digital revolution. But when it comes down to paper versus ebooks, it really is a very genre-specific thing. So there are specific genres, to go back to, say, some young adult books, horror, science fiction, romance. Some of these really predominate in the ebook fashion because of the voraciousness of some of the readers. But there are plenty of places where people still want paper books, and paper books still are very popular in certain genres or with certain categories of readers. What I would say is, think of it this way. What you really need to have, as I said before, a quality idea, a great story to tell, something that is of interest. That's what you're all about as an author and about your book. Worry a little bit less about the format. Just like at one point there were only hardback books and then there were paperback books. Now there are ebooks. So you're really signing a contract for your idea and you as an author versus a specific format. Sometimes people concentrate on the ebook because they think, as self-publishers, it will significantly reduce the cost, of course, which it would, for all to be only available as an ebook versus a paper book. So from that point of view, that's the reason why some people bring that dialogue up. But concentrate more on making the best quality book, product, or novel you can, and worry a little bit less about the format is what I'd say.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, what's your opinion really on whether people still read books? Are they reading them? Do you think it's generational? Are the boomers reading more than the younger people?
Well, let's do a quick poll here. Do the two of you read books?
Yes.
I read books,
Yeah.
and I'm an active reader. I
know
invite
you
everybody.
read a lot.
Yeah, I invite everybody to connect with me on Goodreads. I try to read one book or more a week, and some of them I do. Some of them I do as audiobooks, which is a great and increasingly popular format.
Yeah.
So
Talk
from that
about
point of
that
view, I
too.
do think books will continue to have value. We have to see them in a different way. We have a deep fondness for a picture of us sitting on the subway, seeing other people reading a paper book and connecting with them and thinking, oh, I've read that book before. I wonder what that person's all about. Some of that's still taking place. Some people may be reading it on their phone and not getting the same credit for reading the books they did years ago. Certainly, books have become shorter because of our decreased attention span and because of our
for
love of
sure.
things, the love of things that are shorter. But there are still plenty of books that are immersive, and certainly the Harry Potter series from 20 years ago is a prime example of some very large page count books. And then the author Ken Follett seems every one of his books are 800 or 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
So I would say books are still popular. They may skew shorter and they may skew digital, unbeknownst to some of us, but they're just as popular. I think people love good stories or great information still.
Yes, and we all, excuse me, we all want a place to escape at times.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course.
and the way I feel,
Sometimes more than others.
I'm always amazed now when people are reading uh, hardcover books, because once the Kindle came out, I never looked back. I didn't.
Mm.
I read everything on Kindle because it's lightweight. I can prop it up on a pillow. I don't have to turn the pages.
Or on your
It's just,
phone.
I don't have to have the light on to read. I love it. And
Yeah,
I read a lot of books, but they're all on the Kindle.
Well, I have to say, a fair number of people my age will then start to talk about the tactile feel of holding the book,
I
and then
know.
Yeah.
and then certainly either the smell of an old book or the smell
Oh,
of a new book, and just that feel of being able to look ahead and understand its true length. So I applaud you for converting over to ebooks, but I also know there's a fair number of people that love that tactile sensation.
I
And
do
I know,
too. And frankly, when
yeah.
I read on my iPad, and when the battery runs out, guess what? I can pick up a real book.
Yeah,
But the Kindle even works outside in the sun, and I like to read outside.
the
So
Kindle.
I just really enjoy it.
I do too.
The Kindle's really evolved in such a tremendous fashion. They now have something called, I think it's called Whisper Sync, where you can have a paper, electronic, and audio version of it. And wherever you go to, it then syncs into, if you were on audio and you go to the digital version, it knows exactly where you are and
Oh,
holds your exact place all the way through. So
Wow.
it's really interesting to see the interplay between those three.
and
That's,
mine does do that from the Kindle itself to my iPhone.
Mm.
So if
yeah,
I open up the Kindle app on the iPhone, I'll be in the same page,
yeah, mine
which
does.
is
Mine
great.
does too. And
But I
then,
think the idea of having the Audible be on the same page would be great, because then you can go in the car and keep reading, right?
yeah,
But I sometimes I don't do a lot of audibles because I tend to be thinking about something else and I miss the point of the book. And when
Yeah,
I'm reading, I that never happens.
I
oh,
either with audiobooks or with podcasts do a lot. I'm able to still run, so I'm a runner, and so I enjoy doing it. Then when people bring up the zoning out, I do think sometimes when I'm reading, I get through a page, I'm like, what did I just read? So
oh,
I
yeah.
feel like I
Mhm.
do zone out just as much with paper books as I do with audiobooks.
Yeah, well, it's the
Especially if it's
same with
late at night.
driving. When
If
you're
it's late at
driving,
night, yeah.
sometimes
So
sometimes when you're driving, you
Sure.
lose track of where you just were. Where was I?
Yeah.
Where was my mind? Same thing with, yeah. Sometimes I
yeah.
think that perhaps the author might have lost you somewhere if your mind wanders. So you have to be very careful as a writer, I think, to make sure that you don't wander off, because then you'll send your reader off. What do you think about that?
I do note authors that are very particular to read, that you really have to go along at every word. Some really great literary fiction books that I've read over the years, and you cannot stray at all. And it's really the height of a compliment to them that everything they're saying is that important. And while I do love certain books, I do love Stephen King. Sometimes you could sort of zone out for a couple pages and he's describing something about breakfast. So, from that point of view, those books are a different kind of enjoyable read. But if you do zone out, you're like, what did I really miss there? Unless that's where they found the dead body. So, it does make me appreciate the authors where every word matters.
Well, at least it doesn't put you to sleep.
Yeah, that's right.
and Mary and I have had a book group for years, and I have another
Yeah.
book group too. And sometimes people come to the meeting and they're like, I just couldn't follow this, and they're just not close reading it, because a couple of the books we've done, you have to read every bit of it, and
Right.
it's also choice and good. I'm
Yeah.
blanking on the author's name, but we've read two of them. I think it's Powers, Robert Powers, who wrote Overstory
Overstory is a
and
great book.
Playground. Well,
Yeah,
both of those books, my girlfriends in the book group are going, this is too hard. And I'm going, you guys, like, they think of themselves as literary people. If you can't read those, they're so good. Overstory just took my head off. I thought it was the best thing.
Well, first, I love Overstory, but I will defend your girlfriends in saying that those are two serious major league books. So For
They
people to
are.
read them and get through them, kudos to the people, and the people that don't, it's tough to say because they are two very powerful books.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah,
everybody's
those are.
really busy these days, and everyone
Mhm.
has a shorter attention span. Give us like two or three ideas of what you consider literary fiction as far as the books that you've read and the authors.
Oh, and this is where my memory starts to fail me over
Uh
exact names.
oh, put you on the spot.
No, no, that's okay. I am a fan from when I was younger of the John Updikes and Philip Ross of the world,
Oh,
who really wrote some very memorable characters. John Updike with the rabbit is rich person. I converted years ago to a Japanese author who's very popular called Haruki Murakami.
Murakami.
And Murakami is really just is a tremendous writer and really very, very interesting and has some really novel concepts. Um, I am a fan of Margaret Atwood, of course, of
Me
Handmaid's
too.
Tale fame and some of the other works that she's done. And then I'm a fan of, and I'm going to send this to you because I'm not going to be able to think of it. The woman that wrote Brokeback Mountain is a short story writer,
Oh,
and then she also is a novel writer. So I'm unable to
I can't
grab that
think of her
name.
name
I
either.
can't either.
Yes.
Um,
So
what
Yeah.
what about novels you considered good that perhaps people could use for comps these days? Um, do you have any recommendations on those?
what I would do is develop, as you said, a reading group that you're part of that's willing to read in your genre, and then start to connect with people that are in that genre other than yourself, and start to find out what their favorite titles are. People who are book readers love to talk about books even when they don't remember the author's names,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
start to connect with those people in that group and say, oh, I see you really like historical fiction or science fiction or whatever. What are some of your favorites? So by using the 6 degrees of separation idea and connecting with like readers, I think are some of the
Hmm.
best way to find those comp books.
Do
There are
you have
just
any
so
favorites of contemporary novels,
of contemporary literary fiction.
or just
Uh,
whatever pleases you that may not be
oh yeah, yeah,
considered
yeah.
literary fiction?
I wish I had them right now on the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry I don't have them in that
Sorry
exact way.
to pin you to the wall there. Just curious.
Oh
Well,
well,
So
I mean,
talk,
so
talk,
so decide. I'm writing a book, and I'm gonna get it together. I don't mean literally because I haven't written the book, but how do I know there's a market for my book?
well, I think first of all, if you can come to peace with classifying your book into a genre,
Mm-hmm.
I think then there's going to be a market for it. What the difference is whether you're satisfied with the size of your market. So if you said there
Mm-hmm.
is a young adult fantasy novel,
Mhm,
it's going to be an enormous market that you have.
right.
Whereas if you say it's historical fiction and it's about the late Roman Empire, it's a smaller genre, but there is one there. And if you say it's a LGBTQ horror novel, then you're
Mm-hmm.
going to say, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what the size of that market is. So there are going to be markets once you come to the agreement that you're going to classify it. And the reason why I say you come to peace with classifying it is many people I talk to say, well, my book spans many genres. It could be in this section of the bookstore, in this section of the bookstore, this section. And in point of fact, no book is in multiple sections, or very few books are in multiple sections. And so you have to say,
Mm-hmm.
although my book may be of interest to different readers, if I'm going to go look for it in a Barnes and Noble store or similar, or your local bookstore, they're only going to have it at one place. What is that one place? So
Right.
you have to come to peace with classifying your book and having that, if you're familiar with the term, elevator pitch, where you can explain the
Mm-hmm.
book in a minute and a half to somebody. Then I think that you're going to find a market for it. Could be a small market, could be a large market.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
advice.
Very
Thank you.
good. Very good. It's so talking about promotion again, are
Mhm.
there other, I mean, you covered this in a way as far as social media and blogs, but are there other ways to promote your book? Are there better ways to promote your book?
Uh, I think what the difference is where your audience is. That's what the difference is. So if we're writing a book about leadership in the IT field, you're going to want to be on LinkedIn, and then
Mhm.
being on, let's say, Instagram matters a little bit less. If your book is
Mhm.
about Civil War reenactors, which I'm going to classify, I'm not, but I'm going to classify as being some older men on the East Coast. What do they follow or what do they read that's of interest to them? I'm sure there's a Civil War reenactors podcast that you'd want to check out. I'm sure there's a magazine or newsletter that you'd want to check out. And if you're writing a young adult romance, I'm sure there's a book TikTok about it, and I'm sure there are Instagram accounts about it. So you're going to want to find out where your audience is and concentrate on that. Going back to your question, I think it was your question, Mary, that said, do you have to be the person in your audience or can you write outside the audience? This is an
Mhm.
exact example of certainly you can write outside, but you have to have a way to connect with them, know them personally, have them read and give feedback on your book and give them permission to say, oh, here's the way I find out about new books. Word of mouth, obviously, number one. But then what's number two? I go to TikTok or I go to my social media account or I read the New York Times book review or whatever the case may be. So find out where your audience is. And if you're not sure, then connect with those people that are your target audience.
Mm,
And
great
should I
advice.
ever pay an editor to improve my manuscript?
I've got welcome and unwelcome news here.
Mhm.
So I tell people this is not required, but I tell people, and I myself am a novel writer, and I didn't welcome this advice. But if you write a novel, what you should do is write your first three novels, get them in complete final form, and stick them in a drawer and never look at them again.
If
Oh,
you even
And
finish them.
and
that's going to
then
make people cry.
I know. Listen up. There's some good news here
Okay,
coming.
okay.
Then, when you write the fourth one, you've really mastered your craft. So you have
Mhm.
understood a little bit more about how to make a great product. You could someday go back to those other novels and rewrite them or revisit them, but it's very tough to say, I'm going to write my first novel and I'm going to go have it picked up by an agent and then published by Random House. It's like in your first year of tennis saying you're going to win the US Open. So I'm just being honest. However, if you are a student of the written word and you have been a voracious reader all your life, if you're willing to join a writers group, a local in person's writers group, I'm a member of two and I highly recommend it. If you're willing to give your work to people for them to give you honest feedback on, and if you're willing to really accept their comments and really revise it as opposed to dismiss it, then you may not have to do the three novels in the drawer idea. When you go to an editor, the thing you're going to want to know most is what qualifications they have and what you expect them to do and what they expect to give back to you.
Mm,
Some of them will be very granular related. They're going to want to tell you about that versus which, and these different parts of grammar that are very important. But nobody's ever said, man, that was a terrible story. I didn't connect with the characters, but man, it was grammatically correct. So pe- people really care about the story part. And I
Mhm.
don't want to discount the grammar part. So you're going to want to know, is your editor just an advanced person that's giving grammar advice, or are they really giving story and structure advice? If you're going to pay somebody, first of all, it'll probably be a fair sum of money. I would ask them for references from other authors they've done similar work for, contact those authors and ask how happy they are with them and ask how much rewriting they did.
mm.
So, if you're not going to do the three novels in the thing and be very impressed and be very depressed and turn this podcast off, which I don't want people to, then what you're going to want to do is do a lot of writing, do a lot of reading, and be open to feedback and criticism and be willing to revise.
That's great.
Great.
Um, yeah. So John, what would you like our boomer audience and other listeners to have as a takeaway today?
Everybody, about 20 years ago, there was a big survey where they surveyed people and said, do you have a book in you? 81% of all adults said they had a book in them. This is not an uncommon response. And I believe the older you are, the more likely you are to feel you have a book in you. Expressing oneself is a human need and a human, it gives you great joy to do it. So whether it's in the form of writing notes to your grandchildren or writing your first novel or writing blog posts or whatever it is that you want to do, it's a human thing for you to do. It could be literally writing. It could be typing on their computer. It could be recording YouTube videos, but expressing yourself has great value. Don't be as concerned with nobody cares what I think or I'm never going to get published by Random House. I always say to people, if your great-great-grandmother had written several short stories and several essays about her life, just think of the tremendous value you would put in those documents. And for you to then say, nobody cares about what I think, or nobody's interested in it, or I'm not a gifted writer, those same efforts, however small or large, will be greatly appreciated by the people that know you now, as well as in the future. And I think it's going to bring you great joy.
Oh,
I love that.
That gives me chills. That was just beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been author and publishing consultant John Bond. You can find out more about him and what he offers at publishing at the website publishingfundamentals.com. Thank you so much. That was so valuable.
And thank you for listening to our Thanks for listening to our Late Boomers podcast and subscribing to our Late Boomers podcast channel on YouTube. Listen in next week when we will have another inspiring guest for you. You can listen on any podcast platform, and we do appreciate you. Please follow us on Instagram at I am Kathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. And thanks again to John Bond.
It was a pleasure meeting both of you. This was a real joy, and I look forward to future conversations.
As do we.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.